Are you looking to increase your sales and boost your selling abilities to the max? Welcome to the Continuous Sales Improvement Podcast with best-selling author Eric Lofholm. Eric has trained over 10,000 students, and they have generated over $500 million in sales increases over the last 20 years. One thing he understands is that being a lifelong learner is key to your sales success. Every week, Eric Lofholm interviews elite sales and business professionals and discovers what helps make them the legends they are today.
Hi, this is Eric Lofholm, and I want to welcome all of you to another great edition of the Continuous Sales Improvement Podcast. I've got another fantastic guest. I am so excited to share Andy Miller with all of you today. Before we jump into the interview, let me tell you a little bit about Andy. International sales consultant, been doing it for over 28 years, helping businesses increase their sales results. Andy's recognized as one of the leading sales consultants by Selling Power magazine. He's endorsed by Jay Abraham. He's consulted Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes before. And Andy's somebody who I personally look to learn from. And he's one of the best in the world at what he does. Andy, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thanks, Eric. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Well, let's just jump right in. Tell everybody a little bit about your background so my audience can get connected to you.
Okay. Just a little bit, because my secretary says that she thinks I've been in the witness protection program. So, my grandparents were farmers. My dad was a preacher. We grew up kind of middle class. I've always worked all my life, from having a paper route as a kid, working through high school. I repaired hospital equipment, paid my way through college, got 3 degrees doing that, worked full-time, went to college full-time, and then ended up special ed teacher, moving to running computer centers, which then moved me into sales, selling software, because one of the vendors that I had bought the software from called me and said, "We know you have people skills, we know you have technical skills, why don't you come work for us?" And so that was the beginning of my cross to the dark side of selling.
All right. Well, you probably have.
And I don't mean that. I don't mean the dark side really, but Darth Vader's whispering in my ear, "Tell him the truth, Luke."
Yeah, selling is a very interesting career, as you and I
Yes,
both
it is.
well know. And so you probably know hundreds, maybe even more than 1,000 ways to help somebody increase their sales, help a company increase their sales. What's your best business increasing or sales increasing idea?
Well, people are going to be disappointed because there's no magic dust or silver bullet. It's really about doing the fundamentals consistently on a daily basis, right? Know who you're targeting, know what that client profile looks like, make sure you're doing the activities, make sure you're improving your skills. But there's no shortcut, and everybody's looking for that. What's that magic thing? There isn't a magic thing. If you want to be even in the top 10%, you got to do the fundamentals. And I think of like Michael Jordan as an example, who did not make his junior basketball team in high school, which really ticked him off. And he said, "You know what? I want to be one of the best, and I'm going to outwork everybody." And that's what he did. I mean, you watch him on the basketball court. He was amazing, but what you don't know is he practiced every day an hour longer than everybody else did. And that doesn't include the other coaches that he got, that he paid for out of his own pocket. So the guy was committed to being the best, and he outworked and outlearned everybody. And, if you want to know the secret, that's the secret.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. And our podcast is called Continuous Sales Improvement. It's all about exactly what you just said. And I loved your answer there. All right, Andy, share a setback or low point that you've had in your life. And if you learned from that setback, what's one thing that you learned?
So this has been kind of a reoccurring theme in my life, but it's a term you've heard popularized over the last couple of years called grit. It's really about grit. But at 35, so I was a marathon runner, and I'd qualified for Boston. So I was a pretty decent marathon runner. and I fell 6 floors down an elevator and was paralyzed. So, 5 years of physical therapy, the doctors said I would never walk right again, let alone I would never run. And 5 years later, I ran the Marine Corps Marathon. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't pretty. It took me hours longer than my normal race time would have been. But what I learned is, don't believe what others tell you. Just because it's their opinion doesn't mean that it's fact or gospel or written in stone. So, that was a life setback, and we all have plenty of life setbacks. I don't think it's what the setback is. I think it's what you do about the setback.
Yeah. And I've always been curious about this. With marathon running, I've heard that about the 17 or 18 mile mark, your brain starts telling you, stop, you can't go any further. And if you keep just running through it, eventually your brain goes, okay, he's serious or she's serious, and you keep running. Is that true? Is that what happens at the 17 or 18 mile mark?
Yeah, they last couple miles, they say you hit the wall, and you do. The energy gets sucked out of you. Now, if you've trained for it, you know to expect it, and you've done your carb loading and all that stuff, you can minimize that. But they say you hit the wall, and at that point, you got to decide, do I quit or do I keep on going? And at that point, you just go, let's just take this one step at a time. And you know what? That's analogous to cold calling and prospecting. Let's just do one prospecting at a time, one cold call at a time, one email at a time, because you got to make up your mind. Am I going to get to the goal or not?
Yeah, I think a lot of people when they're prospecting, they get towards the end of their day and they're like, I'm done. And it's kind of like that 17 mile, 18 mile mark in the marathon. No, You can keep going. There's more left in the tank. You think there's nothing left, and there's still more left in the tank.
Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.
Well, here's the next question. In 5 minutes or less, give us an overview of how you accomplished a success in your life that you're proud of. So what's something you accomplished that you're proud of?
Gosh. So I think it is. Well, so I've got two of them. So one was when I was 14, myself and 6 other friends talked our parents into letting us bicycle, take our 10 speeds from Chicago, Illinois to Roanoke, Virginia without any adult supervision. Now, if you have any idea what 14-year-old boys are like, you're thinking to yourself, there's no way I'd do that. But we planned for a year, and we thought, okay, let's prove that we can do the mileage to ourselves. Let's figure out what knowledge we need, learn to be a bike mechanic, get your first aid certification. Then let's start doing weekend trips and show our parents we can do a 20, a 40, 100. Let's ride out to a state park, camp overnight, come back. So we kind of weaned them into it, if I could say it that way. And then we did it, and we learned all kinds of lessons. I mean, we prepared before we asked the parents which parents are most likely to say yes, which parents are most likely to say no. We came up with which objections or which parents going to hit us with. We made the list. We got together every Tuesday night, and we role played. Okay, Andy, you be Mrs. Gibble. Marv, you be Mr. Gibble. Dave, you approach your parents, and now we're just going to hit you with every objection, and you got to be able to handle it. And so we came up with all the list of objections. What's your route going to be? Where are you going to stay? Do you have permission? What if there's an emergency? And we talked them into it. Now, we divided the parents up into the parents that were going to say yes and the parents were going to say no. And we went to the yes parents the first night, and we used their peer pressure to get the no parents to say yes. So, think about this. There was lots of planning, lots of strategizing. I would consider that the first major sale that all of us ever made in our lives because of what that took. But the second story, do I have time to tell you the second one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sales related. So the second one is, so I got fired from my first sales job. I told you I'd run a computer center, bought some software. They hired me. And I said, I don't know if I'll be any good in sales. I don't know anybody who's ever done it. I've never been trained in it. And they said, well, that's okay. Come try it for a year. And if that doesn't work, we'll put you into technical because that's your background. I said, okay, great. So it was less than a year into it. And the president of the company walks in the office. He goes, I'm going to fire you. And I said, why? And he goes, you're not hitting your numbers. And I said, that's not true. And I pulled out my spreadsheet, which was all on paper back then, right? So pulled out my spreadsheet and I showed him, here's my quota, here's my deals. And he goes, oh, my two biggest deals, he goes, those aren't yours, those are your managers. My manager had been taking credit for my deals.
Mm.
And I said, that's not true, and I'll prove it. And I pulled out my notes, every conversation I had, dates, times, had the purchase order numbers. And I said, if you put me in front of a jury of my peers, I can prove without a shadow of a doubt that these are my deals. And he goes, okay, I'm gonna fire you anyways.
Wow.
And I said, okay, why? And he said, because you're in a funk. And I said, you're right. I was in a funk. My sister just committed suicide. My head was not screwed on straight. And, that's an unfortunate thing that happens in people's lives of, parents got divorced, suicide, death, other traumas that happen, but things happen, right? And I had not bounced back. So I said, you're right. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I said, for the next 30 days, I'll work for free. But you and I are going to agree on a number that I'm going to hit. If I hit that number, then you'll pay me retroactively, both my base and my commission. If I miss it by 0.1%, then I'll come shake your hand, say thank you for giving me the opportunity. You can keep everything, and I'll leave with some grace and dignity, and I'll say thank you for trusting me and giving me one more shot. He goes, okay, you're on, right? That's like putting somebody on a performance improvement plan. Most people bail out when they're put on a PIP, right? So that's a self-defining moment. Do I step up or do I bail out? And he goes, okay, you're on. I go, no, I'm not done yet. And you make me the sales manager. Because since my sales manager been stealing my deals, I wanted to become his sales manager, and then I was going to keep him. I wasn't going to fire him. I was going to keep him. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay, you're on. So for the next 30 days, because we never had any sales training, we never had any coaching, it was just pick up the phone, call somebody and go, hey, this is what we have. Want one? I mean, we were grinders. That's what we were. And so I bought, books on tape. I would listen to a sales book on the way into work, and, one side of the tape and one side on the way back from work. I would come in and start calling at 6 a.m. because data center managers come in at 6, and I'd call until midnight because the data center managers in Hawaii didn't leave till 6, which was midnight our time. And I just thought, you know what? I got to teach myself, and I'm just going to, call from East Coast to Hawaii. And then I went and found a coach. Now, this guy had been a Vietnam vet. He was a little crazy, was a chain smoker. I think he was a hermit, hadn't been out of his house in decades, but had been in sales. And he was a chain smoker, had not aired out his house, and he had 9 cats, and I'm allergic to cats. So I would go see him every Saturday morning. I'd go to his house, and I'd walk in, and I'd start, breaking out, eyes watering and itching and nose running and all that stuff. But I'm going, you know what? I'm going to hit my quota. And that's what I did. And at the end of the month, I hit my quota, and the president came in. He said, well, hot stuff, you got it. You made your quota, and I'm going to pay your base, and I'm going to pay your commission, and you're now sales manager.
Wow, that is a tremendous story.
It's a crazy story, but and I kept the guy, and he stayed.
Yeah.
So,
well, one of the things about both your stories there is it demonstrates sales creativity, and I don't know that that's really talked a lot about in sales training. Thinking about this not from like what you read in a book, okay, here's the strategy of how you approach this situation. In both examples, you were extremely creative. And this, it's probably just something that just naturally comes to you. But for any of you that are listening, if you will look at any of your sales situations that you're facing and think, well, how could I creatively approach this opportunity? And you use that with me, and you and I, we've engaged a few times through the years, but we re-engaged because we were both recognized by Selling Power magazine.
Yep.
And you had proactively reached out to me, and you you prospected me over LinkedIn and offered for us to have a kind of like a virtual coffee, which I accepted. Can you just speak to sales creativity? Is this just something that you just naturally do?
That's a good question. I think it is something that I naturally do, but it's not just curiosity about sales. It's curiosity about everything. I want to know how things work. I mean, when I was a little kid, my grandma, when things would break, instead of throwing them away, she'd give them to me and let me just rip them apart, right? Whether it was a blender or a TV or who knows what it was, but if it was broken, she would let me tear it apart and I would dissect it and look at the pieces. And yeah, I love to do international travel. And when I go to other countries, I'm not judgmental about their habits or their systems or how they've organized their society. I'm curious. Excuse me, why do you do it this way versus that way? Or what's your opinion on this? And again, and I listen out of curiosity, not out of being judgmental. Because guess what? The way it works in my world, there's no reason that that's the only way or the right way. But I'm always curious, and that's how I met. You mentioned Jay Abraham earlier, who I adore and respect highly. And Jay's got that curiosity factor. He's curious about how they do their marketing and how they get their referrals and how they make sure they provide good customer service. And so I've always been curious about people's systems, models, processes, thinking. Even in my dating life, I remember a woman asking me one time what went wrong with my last relationship, and my answer was, well, here's what I could have done better. It wasn't to blame the gal. It was, I have ownership for it didn't go right, and here's what I could have done better. And I said to her, how about you? And she could not do self-examination. She went ballistic and said, oh, this guy did this and this and this. and after she went ballistic and was done, I said, that's great. What could you have done?
Yeah.
And she was stumped. So, I really think that curiosity is, part of that curiosity is self-examination. Part of that curiosity is realizing that there's other ways of thinking about it and looking at it. And I would encourage people, and I might have even heard Jay say this one time, I would encourage you to just plain get curious. Get curious about everything.
Yeah.
So if we want to make that more sales specific, get curious. But, curiosity will open up your mind to all kinds of possibilities you just never thought of. I had a doctor recommend to me the other day that I should get acupuncture. Okay. Well, I mean, hadn't considered it for what was going on, but I was glad that she was open-minded enough to suggest it. And I'm like, you know what? I'll check that out. What do I got to lose? So, I would say get curious about everything.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Next question is, what is one way that you've used repetition to improve or master a skill in your career?
That's another thing that I think I've always done, at least when it comes to mastery, right? When it comes to just, I want to dabble. Okay, I want to learn how to be a good baker, bake cakes, breads, whatever. You try it a couple times. You're curious, but you don't want to become the best baker in town. You make your breads, you burn a couple of them, you learn some things. That's not repetition reinforcement. An athlete, name a professional athlete that doesn't get coaching, that doesn't do repetition, reinforcement, doesn't practice. I mean, they don't exist. Every single one of them goes through that. So really, to me, it's what level of mastery do you want? And if you want to be in that top 10%, because you and I both know in sales, it's not bronze, silver, and gold. You get the gold or you get nothing. So to me, repetition reinforcement's critical. I do that. I'm a weightlifter, no longer a marathon runner, but I got a personal trainer. In my business, I got a business coach. In selling, I've had a sales coach for years, and I study under different people. I kind of seek out, who's a master in the area that I'm interested in, and then I go study with the master. And that's how I first met Jay. Jay was a master at marketing. I'm like, I got a chance to go study with a master, so that's what I do. Find a master and go study, and all of them will have you do repetition, reinforcement, practice.
Fantastic. How do you like to learn? So when you want to get better, you just mentioned, find a master. I can see, the books behind you in the in our video here. So obviously reading, finding somebody who's an expert. Any other way? I mean, those are two great ways. Anything else come to mind as to how you like to learn?
Well, I answer that, but I'm going to go off on a tangent for a second, because you said, about curiosity. Yeah, that's just 2 of 8 bookshelves. So,
oh, wow.
I've never counted out how many books that I have, but I get a book and I will read about everything. So that curiosity. So obviously, you're right. Good observation. I like to learn by reading. I like to learn by experience. So whether that's role play or practice or hands-on, listening, lecture, workshop. But I like to touch and feel and experience. What doesn't work for me, for whatever reason, is video. Video just does not keep my attention. Now I know, video is becoming more and more popular. I can't sit down long enough to watch video.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, that is me observing something. In a workshop, you learn something and it's hands-on, right? Reading, I can read it a chapter at a time, or go walk on the treadmill and read. So yeah, I can do something, but video is not interactive enough for me.
Excellent. I want to talk just a little bit about assessments, because that's what's brought you and I together. You are an expert with using assessments as a way of helping either a salesperson or a sales team. And I'd like you to just speak to any either individual salespeople watching this or sales managers. How have you found assessments are a valuable tool when you're helping somebody?
So what I love about assessments, and I need to say the right kind of assessment, because there's hundreds of assessments on the market, and the question comes down to, what are you trying to measure? But the advantage of using the right assessment is, to me, honest assessment, no pun intended, honest assessment and feedback, right? So for example, maybe I think I'm healthy and I go to the doctor for my annual physical, and she says, yeah, I think your cholesterol is high. Well, she didn't do any blood work. That's her opinion. And I'm going to disagree with it, because I'm going to go, you know what? I pay attention to my eating, I sleep, I exercise. I mean, I'm doing all the right things, according to the textbook, right? Then she does her blood work, and it comes back and says, I have high cholesterol. Now, it might be my eating habits, or it might be hereditary. But the fact is, with that feedback and new piece of information, we can make adjustments so that I can have better outcomes. And that's what I feel about assessments. If you want to be better at selling, so the one I like to use the most looks at your skills, because I want to improve my skills, but it also looks at things that undermine your skills. So what are your belief systems about selling? Do you believe that you have to discount to win the business? So maybe you'll close it, but you'll give the margins away, right? Or maybe you're not that hungry to be in sales. Maybe you should be in a different role in sales, because the one you're in is not a fit. Like, I remember assessing a guy. He was outside sales. It wasn't a fit for him. He really should have been major accounts and going out and acquiring major accounts. And I said to the CEO, he's got amazing skills and ability. You just have him in the wrong seat on the bus. So, let's repurpose him. Let's put him into a place where he will thrive versus get by. And that, to me, is the advantage of the right kind of assessment. Now, the ones that people are familiar with is DISC or Myers-Briggs. And those are great for what they're intended, but they're just meant for DISC. That's a coaching tool about your behavior style or your social style. That has nothing to do with performance. It just means, nice dog or mean dog. Hey, maybe you need to lighten up a little bit so you can bond and rapport a little better. Maybe you shouldn't snap their head off, right? So again, it goes back to what are you trying to determine? Now, if you're trying to determine how do I become the best in my industry or how do I become world class, then I'm going to want something that goes much deeper and will give me honest feedback and won't sugarcoat it. But again, that ties into once you get that feedback, are you going to do coaching, repetition, reinforcement, and practice to get there?
Yeah. So what you're saying is it's kind of like the doctor giving you this feedback without doing the blood work. Maybe the sales manager's giving their salesperson feedback without really knowing what's going on. And the assessment is a great tool to help them. And one of the things you shared with me, the assessment that you use, now I'm using, it measures not just one sales mindset, but how many mindsets does the assessment do?
83 different beliefs about sales.
Yeah, I mean, that's mind-blowing. You think about the concept of, sales belief, what do you believe about sales or sales mindset? And then this is looking at all of these different pieces.
Yeah.
And so you've, from the seat you sit in, I'm sure you've looked at lots of different assessment tools to help salespeople and sales teams. So what is the one that you recommend? So anybody watching this knows, okay, that's the one that Andy from all his 28 years of experience recommends. What's the one that you recommend?
Well, the one I recommend is OMG, but I would recommend your listeners come to you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if they're following you, then they bought into your approach, your methodology, and all that. So yeah, OMG is the one that I recommend, and it's got the data analytics on 2.1 million salespeople, and of all the so-called sales assessments out there, I've looked at 39 assessments that called themselves sales assessments. It is the most validated, which means it's the most accurate.
So if you're watching this right now or listening, and if you want to better understand yourself as a salesperson, or if you're managing a team and you want to know what's going on with your team, or you're hiring people and you want to know before you hire them, I mean, that's a huge investment, financial investment, training investment. And you want to know from Andy's 28 years of experience, and he's looked at 39 different assessments, the OMG assessment is the one that he's found has the best results. And so you can reach out to me and we can have a conversation about that. If you're an individual or if you're a team, and we can help you. And Andy's coaching me on it. We're learning all about it. I'm so excited to be working with him on the assessments. I've got a couple of rapid fire questions, Andy, as we wrap up here today. So in 1 minute or less, what's a goal that you're working on right now, personally or professionally in your life?
So my professional goal that I'm working on right now is I've been working on a book on how to hire salespeople, and we're on the final draft of that, and I'm hoping to have that wrapped up this week. But this has been a 2-year project on what science knows about hiring that's never made it out to the mainstream, and it's pretty mind-boggling actually of what people don't know about hiring and how they just tend to go with their gut. I'll give you one statistic. So 70% of all new hires, now this is new hires, not just sales, feel like the job was misrepresented. Think about that. So they're starting off on the wrong foot. They show up and they go, this isn't at all what I thought it was going to be. Why? Because the company didn't understand the job. The ad was putting on a positive spin. The interviewers were putting on a positive spin. Nobody talked about some of the harder things, and then they show up, and it's like, wait a second, this isn't what you told me it was going to be. And then half of those leave within 6 months.
Yeah, that's a really fantastic insight. That sounds like a great book. Well, I can't wait to take a look at that when that comes out, especially coming from all of your experience. Thanks. Okay, next question. Singer or musical group that you like?
So that's a tough one. It's really more the genre. I'm big on R&B.
Okay.
So rhythm and blues, and I'm big on smooth jazz. So anything, especially in the R&B world. I love the old funk.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right.
Yeah, if you can make it funky, I love it.
Okay. And next question. What is your favorite sports team?
Okay. Love that one. Because what my wife says about one of the things my wife loves about me is I don't watch sports. She knows more about football, basketball, and baseball than I do. But here's my favorite athlete. So if you watch mixed martial arts at all, there's a woman named Ronda Rousey, and she was the best MMA female fighter, in the world for a number of years. Here's what I love about her. Early in her career, she decided she wanted to be the best, and she had to make a choice because she found the trainer that she wanted to work with, world-class trainer, but she had only enough money to either pay for rent or pay for the trainer. She decided to live in her car for a year and use her rent money to pay for training.
Wow.
Now, that kind of goes to how badly do you want it, right? Because people go, oh, yeah, I want to be the best. Really? How badly do you want it? She wanted it badly enough. She was willing to live in her car. So I love that. And I'm going, how badly do you want to win the deal? How badly do you want to be the best in your industry or at your company or in the world class? But I think that speaks well. It's been the reoccurring theme of what we've talked about today of grit and how badly you want it and what are you willing to do to get there. And, mixed martial arts goes back to repetition and reinforcement and practice.
Fantastic. Andy, any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
If they're not getting coaching and improving their skills, and I don't care what level they're at, if they're beginner or they're a master, even in martial arts, if you get a black belt, there's the 3rd degree, there's the 8th degree, even those folks continue to enhance. And my belief has always been, if you're not finding ways to improve, then you're dying. So if you plan to be in sales, and that's part of what I love about sales, you have to master a lot of things. You've got to master psychology and people skills and listening skills and product knowledge and industry knowledge. That is constant improvement. I love that. So, if you're in sales and you're not getting coaching, get out there and get some coaching, because if you're not, your competitor is, and you're going to find out when you lose the deal.
Well, it was great to spend this time with you, Andy. That's going to wrap up another edition of the Continuous Sales Improvement Podcast. I appreciate you, Andy. I'm really grateful to have you in my life and helping
Thanks,
me
Eric.
in my business. And just thanks for all the great shares that you had today. And I want to thank all of you listeners. Thank you for listening in. Please share the podcast with others and listen to other episodes. You can find information on our other episodes at continuousssalesimprovement.com. That's going to wrap it up. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like this episode, make sure and subscribe to get notified of new episodes each week. And check out our other great episodes by going to continuousssalesimprovement.com. That's continuousssalesimprovement.com. And while you're there, pick up Chapter 1 totally free of my new book, Continuous Sales Improvement. Just opt in when you go to the website. Until next time, keep on improving. I'll see you in the next episode.